This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Welcome back, everyone. It is time once again. We are going to look at some viewer work today, some zines and books that were sent in by various people. But real quick, before we get going, I want to mention two announcements we've got coming up on workshops. First off, on May 12th, I'm doing my first online masterclass, which is going to be really cool. You can do it from the comfort of your own home. We will meet on Zoom. The class will last a week and a half. We will meet every other day. I'm going to give you assignments. This is kind of like a photography boot camp. If you want to take your work to the next level, this is a really good one to do it. I will put links in the show description below for those interested. And we've got two zine workshops coming up. The first one starts June 7th. The second one starts July 26th. These courses are also online, and if you've ever wanted to put your work into a book or a zine type format, this is a really good way to do it. The courses last a month long. We meet every week, and you'll have assignments based on your project. Week 3, we break into small groups, and you'll get some one-on-one with me. This is a really cool way to get a project going and get some really good feedback from people as well. So I'll put links to all these in the show description in case you guys are interested. But without further ado, let's get to some of your mail. Okay, so first up is this book that comes to us from Sebastian Gateau. This is called The Orphaned Angel. He also has a note which he writes about the book. He says, "Dear Ted, my name is Sebastian Gateau. I'm a self-taught amateur photographer from Toronto, Canada. I have been following your YouTube channel for a couple of years now and especially enjoy your viewer mail segments. All the amazing work submitted by viewers you have showcased on your channel inspired me to challenge myself in creating my first photo book. The Orphaned Angel is a highly experimental work that took me a year to complete. With this project, I wanted to explore the idea that a non-human entity can be inspired to express oneself through a camera. I had help along the way from two mentors who assisted with the sequencing of the images and written text. This project was quite challenging, yet the whole process of creating these abstract images and shaping the story itself was very therapeutic and rewarding. I have only printed 15 copies of this book, but wanted to send you one as a token of thanks to the inspiration to produce a work in book form. Hope you enjoy turning the pages and would be appreciative of any feedback you can offer, knowing that this is my first attempt at creating a photo book. I'm sure there's a lot of room for improvement. With warm regards, Sebastian." Well, Sebastian, I have news for you, my friend. This is absolutely fabulous. I really love this book. I think the abstract style is very difficult to work with sometimes. You've done an outstanding job with this. It's very dreamlike, which is interesting because I get to a chapter called Dreams and it really hits home. I love the sequencing. The typography's good. I love the print quality. It's black and white, not purple and white. You did excellent on this. And so, man, the only thing I would say is if you've only printed 15 of these, is find a way to sell it and get more. This is a really excellent first effort. The other thing I want to praise you on is you said you had two mentors that helped you with the sequencing. And this is something that it's more of a general criticism of work that gets sent in general, but a lot of people don't do that. And I think that's a huge missing step because a lot of times there's things that just having an outside opinion on, whether it's graphic design, whether it's sequencing, whether it's the work makes sense, it's something that people skip and they don't have it. The other thing that I like is your work is abstract, but a lot of times when I see people who send in abstract works, it becomes slightly predictable. It becomes very pattern-based, very texture-based, and every time I turn the page, I know I'm going to see another abstraction, but I love the way you've done this. I think it's really well done. The compositions are interesting. It's not blurry for the sake of being blurry. You still have a composition. You still have some kind of figurative in here. There's still a payoff and a reason that I'm turning the page and looking at the book. Man, this is fabulous. You should be very proud. The only thing I can say is I can't wait to see your next book, so keep at it, my man. Man, this is great. I will link up to Sebastian's work below if anybody is interested in a copy. He's only got 15, but maybe we could give him a reason to put it in print and get some more. So anyway, man, thanks for sharing. This is awesome. All right, so next up is this book that comes to us from Bangladesh. This is called The Passage of Time. It was sent in by Dr. Khandaker, Amitabh, Nobel. Dr. Nobel's also got a note here which briefly says, "Dear Ted, thank you for the informative and educational zine and book reviews. I use photography as a tool to document and tell interesting stories around us. Here's my first photography book published in Bangladesh. I look forward to hearing your critique of my book. Best regards, Dr. Noble." So Passage of Time is quite interesting and got my attention here. It's got a really interesting prologue where Dr. Noble goes through this idea of time and the passage of time and how that also intertwines with architecture, seasons, so forth. And so the book is divided, I guess, into chapters. So we start with spring, then we start moving seasonally through summer, then we actually start getting to some architecture stuff with the Mayans, some trips he's done, and then oddly winding up in the United States, which is actually very interesting. So a couple points that I want to make about this is, first of all, I think you've done an outstanding job here. I like the way this is printed. Black and white is well rendered in here, and I say that because you wouldn't believe how many times I get books where they're black and white, but they're done on a color printer, and so the problem is that you end up with kind of a purple white. This looks really fantastic. The only comment I would make is you've got one image here, and the only reason I'm going to single this out is it is a big image, which is this one. It's a tree, and I assume that's the sun behind the tree. This is a tough one to get in black and white. It kind of looks like it's over sharpened a little bit. That is the only criticism that I have on the print quality. I think everything in here is outstanding. The only thing that I want you to consider, and I think that this would be your next book that you would start thinking about this. I mentioned the prologue because it's very well written, and I like the idea that you have with this whole idea of time, ancient architecture, and how place and all these elements start to fit together, like the idea of seasons. I like the organization of this. I think visually it would be more interesting to actually see these things intersect more. So when you're in the seasons, you've got more nature-type shots, there's more flowers, stuff like that, and then we get into architecture and we get into specific places. The result is it has a feeling that you took a trip there and that's where you did the photography. But I'm more interested and how maybe the architecture and the nature stuff and actually the elements of time fit together, and maybe they start to intersperse a little more, because I think you could explore those relationships a little bit more in detail. Other than that, that is a minor complaint, and I wouldn't change anything in this book. I would just consider it with your work moving forward. I think you've got an interesting eye for both landscape, architecture, well, both, all three, landscape, architecture, and more of these organic nature shots. And I think that you've done a really outstanding job on here. I will link up to Passage of Time in the show description. Good job. You should be very proud of this. So I can't wait to see where you go from here. All right, so moving from two excellent books to some excellent zines. I want to talk about these zines next, but real quick, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor this week, who are the always awesome folks over at Squarespace. How easy is it to build an amazing website in a matter of minutes? Squarespace has you covered. It's dead simple. Head over to Squarespace, hit Get Started. You can start by using Squarespace Blueprint AI and SEO tools, which will give you an impressive website in no time. Something unique because, you're not like other websites. Give your site a name. Next, you can build your homepage. We'll start with a few preset layouts just to get us going. Want to sell products like prints, books, maybe you make a zine? Well, you can feature those on your homepage. Create a few more sections if you want. Let's also give it a color palette. There's a whole bunch to choose from. Just get us started. We can change this all later. Next, let's select the typography choices. Welcome to your website. Everything is set up and it's all ready for you to customize. Squarespace is built on Fluid Engine, the next generation of website design. Select Edit, and Fluid Engine allows you to drag, place, and resize any element on the page. You can snap these to a grid, you can make them float on top of one another, you can freeform however you like. You can even preview and adjust how the site looks on either desktop or mobile. The layouts are independent. Of course, you'll want a portfolio for your work. Creating an image gallery is as easy as dropping a folder of images on your web browser. Once uploaded, you can drag to resort, customize the look, and Squarespace writes all of the code for you. Everything just works and it looks fabulous. Want to sell your own prints, books, or zines? Flexible payments allow you to make the checkout process absolutely seamless when you sell products or services. You can accept credit cards, PayPal, Apple Pay, and in eligible countries, you can offer customers the option to buy now and pay later with Afterpay and ClearPay. You should try Squarespace for yourself. It's absolutely free, no credit card required. Just go to squarespace.com/AOP, sign up for that free trial. If you decide Squarespace is right for you, I can save you an additional 10% on your order by using offer code AOP on checkout. That's right, the code is AOP. So stop procrastinating, go build your website today. And I want to give a special shout out and thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. All right, so next up, I've got two zines that come to us from a gentleman named Piotr. This is Fly Me to the Moon. It's a zine of abstracts, and this one is Before It Disappears. And I also want to read a little bit of his note here. It says, Dear Mr. Forbes, first, I want to thank you for your fascinating explanations about photography, which I have been following for quite some time. They have often helped me gain insight into the way that we can express our visions, ideas, stories, and emotions. Because of the attention you give to the publications sent to you, you provide inspiration for the way in which photos can be published. This is why I've submitted to send you my very first photo booklets. You see, sometimes I still doubt the quality of my photos, so I hope you can give me some feedback. Finally, I hope you can and will continue the art of photography for a long time, and I wish you all the best, Peter. All right, so Peter, you're calling these small photo books, which I think is fair. I was calling them zines. Either way, you're dealing with a shorter format, and I think this is one of the wonderful things that's the difference between zines and books. Books are long, they're bigger, they're more formal in their presentation, and they allow for a much larger exploration of the work between the covers. And I think when you have smaller zine type things like this or photo booklets, you're able to explore one topic in depth, and you've definitely done this. From a quality standpoint, these are outstanding. The only thing I would encourage you to do is I'm just not a huge fan of this ultra glossy paper. I would go with something that's more of a matte. And the only reason I say that is your photos are really good, and sometimes the high gloss makes the photos look like they're wet, and it's just kind of distracting. They catch lights in the room. That's super nitpicky. I think this is the one of the two. I think you have a lot of vocabulary that you're exploring with this whole idea of abstraction. It's something I mentioned earlier. And I think that one of the things with abstract photography, again, is there are many ways you can interpret abstract photography. And a lot of times I'll get it to where it starts becoming very predictable. I think you saw an example, the first book that I showed in here, where it's approached one way, and I think you're doing it another one. You're doing it very geometrically. Nothing's necessarily blurry. There are a few in here that are, but I think you're dealing with a lot of shape, a lot of presentation of geometrical space in here. I think this is really, really well done. I like the fact that the subjects are kind of all over the place because it keeps it surprising every time I turn the page. This is a great spread. I think you've just done an outstanding job in here. I get less of that feeling on Before It Disappears. I think Before It Disappears is good. You're obviously going for nature in this, but it ends up being just a lot of nature shots that don't have a relationship to one another in the same way that Fly Me to the Moon does. And that is important, and I want to say this just for anybody watching, is that, when you're putting together something in a book, the book is the work. And when you have two images that face each other in a spread, like it or not, they have a relationship with one another. And so that is a way of being able to weave ideas, tell a story visually, and come up with sort of a language that you're using to promote whatever it is that you're trying to get across to the viewer. So that being said, the other thing I want to address is you made a comment on here that you're still not sure of these things. That's why I wanted to point that out, because a lot of times confidence comes with experience, and I think that this is a common thing with a lot of photographers when they're starting out, or if they've only been photographing for a little while, or if they're isolated and they're not around other people to discuss art with or be able to get feedback on their images. And I'm happy to provide that, and I hope this helps you. I think that that's just going to be a matter of time, and I think you're going to get better as you go, and just keep doing it. What I would do is continue this format and just think of each one of these books as just one little visual statement, something that you can make. I like the idea of abstraction. I think the nature thing is cool, but I think this one's better. And just maybe pick another small item that you can just explore. Maybe it's just a singular subject and you take it from different angles. I think there's a lot of possibilities here. So anyway, Peter, many thanks for sharing. I hope this finds you well, and you should be proud of these. They look really good, man. Thanks. Next up is this zine, which comes to us from Piotr Drabik. This is called Texas. Love the cover on this. This is outstanding. I'm going to read you a little bit of his note here so you'll get some insight here. He writes, "Dear Ted, as you know, photos after printing start a new life. It's like being reborn. That's why I decided to create my first photo zine. I'm a political journalist from Warsaw, Poland. On September 2023, I traveled to 3 so-called red states, Georgia, Texas, and Florida, and trying to find an answer to the question, what people living here are thinking about the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the transatlantic relationship. During my journey, I spent one day in Moscow, Texas, a small unincorporated community in Polk County. Far from big politics, residents have their own problems and points of view, and I'm trying to share my experience in this short-owned publication. Best wishes from Warsaw, Piotr." So, Piotr, this is actually very interesting. I cannot tell you how much I love this cover, by the way. The typography is very cool. Once I get into it, I like your intention. I like what you've written in here, and obviously being a journalist, you have an eye for that. What I'm not convinced about is I think I want to see more on the photographs. I think you posed an interesting question, what somebody in a small rural community thinks about a relationship with another country halfway around the world that is obviously controversial at this point. The collage thing on top of the hand type, I'm assuming that these are journals that you were keeping, but again, that's a huge assumption. And I'm not sure that I'm actually getting to the answer to your question in here. And I do not mean to say that in a derogatory way. I'm just saying that I want to see that explored more photographically as we go through here. I just see kind of elements of the town. I'm not getting a whole lot of what's happening with the Russian-Ukrainian war necessarily. I think it's a great topic. I don't dislike the photographs, but what I want to see is how they tie more into your concept. That's the only thing I would say about this. I think as a work on its own, it's very interesting. I think the portraits are interesting. You're certainly painting an interesting picture of small Texas towns, which I have much experience with in my own career. But anyway, I think it's an interesting start. I would like to see you take this further, I think is what I'm saying. The design is outstanding, and again, the intention is outstanding, but I want to see more photographs, and I want to see how those relate to each other as we go through the zine itself. I'm not getting them in the collage format necessarily, and I'm not really sure that what I'm looking at is answering the question you're getting at. And like I said, please don't take that as an insult. I just want to see if you were to do a second part of this, or if you were to continue this idea, that's what I would like to see is the photos. Basically, you could look at them on their own and start getting more out of what your intention is than having to support it with a lot of text. But again, these are things that once you start doing more publications, you get a better handle on. And the only way to get better at these things is to do them. So I really appreciate and commend you for doing this and sending it in. And like I said, I don't want to sound like I'm insulting you, because it's not that anything's bad in here. I just think that you have a wonderful intention, and it just kind of is not really hitting the mark for me, so to speak. But anyway, I want to thank everybody for sending stuff in today. If you want to know more about the photographers who have shared their work, I will link everybody in the show description below. And until the next video, I will see you guys then. Later.